Hello everybody. Once again, I just read that this book is getting a film adaptation, and because Zevin is working on the screenplay right now in honor of the occasion, I figured I would today review every single video game, real-world game mentioned in this book and why they are relevant to the book itself. Once again, Sam and Sadie, our main characters, are video game producers by trade, and in the book produce some really incredible games like Solution, Ichigo, and Master of Revels. Throughout the text, Zevin shows each of our characters playing and discussing different games that exist in the real world, and today I just want to show how each of those go on to influence the games that they produce. And before I jump into it, do note there's going to be spoilers all throughout this video, so if you haven't read the book, just be aware, as I go, they're going to get heavier with spoilers. So, first is Donkey Kong, mentioned in the first paragraph of the first chapter of the novel. Before Sam was Mazer, during his youth, he was SAM on the Hall of Fame of his grandfather's Donkey Kong machine, but mostly known as Sam. As the story proceeds, Sam and the other characters come back time and again to this Donkey Kong machine that sits in his grandfather's restaurant, the Dong and Bong's New York-style house of pizza in LA's K-Town. Appropriate that this is the first game that we see mentioned in the book, because it's also the first game that I ever recall playing as a little kid right by the entrance to the grocery store, stand-up arcade Donkey Kong machine. I guess that may date me, but whatever. Frogger. While Sam is trying to navigate the crowd outside the subway station of Harvard Square, I believe, he's saying, "Excuse me," and he feels particularly like the doomed amphibian from the game Frogger. This is because while he's physically large, he actually has a foot injury that requires him to move with delicacy and grace throughout the world. Like Frogger. Honestly, it's such a classic game, but I've found it to be frustrating at times. Oregon Trail. So in that crowd, he spots his estranged friend, Sadie, and says, "Sadie, Sadie, Sadie, Sadie Miranda Green, you have died of dysentery." To which she replies, "You are incorrect, Sam Mazer. It is my sister that died of dysentery. I died of a snake bite due to exhaustion." And if you're a kid growing up in the 80s or 90s, you most certainly played Oregon Trail either preloaded on a computer that you had at home or in the elementary school computer lab. Without question. Next up is Mortal Kombat, Tekken, and Street Fighter. So these games are very different from the sort of game that Solution is, which is what Sam is handed by Sadie in that crowd, in that meeting. And these games are the sort of thing that you would expect two young college dudes to be playing in their dorm room. Super Mario Brothers. At this point, the story goes a little bit into the past where Sam and Sadie met, and this is the game that Sadie finds Sam playing in the game lounge room of the children's hospital where she finds him recovering. She notes that he is particularly good at this game, able to, at the end of the climb, jump and land on the flagpole. If you played Super Mario Brothers, you know what I'm saying. Yes, this is a mark of particular talent that Sam has. Duck Hunt. This is the game that Sam and Sadie switched to playing after Super Mario Bros. With its iconic light guns. Again, Sadie notes that Sam is quite talented at gaming. Fantastically good, she says about his gaming. I vividly remember the legendary light guns from this game. Comment below if you remember Duck Hunt too. Commander Keen and Doom. So when Sadie starts her advanced game seminar at MIT, it's noted that her professor, Dove Misra, is like the two Johns combined, Carmack and Romero, the kind of young man prodigy video game designers at that time who had produced those games. Separately, Wolfenstein 3D is also mentioned when Sam is trying to convince Sadie to stay the summer with him and produce their first game, which would go on to be Ichigo. He says, "Stay here, take 3 months, and make a game with me." Carmack and Romero were the same age as us when they made Wolfenstein 3D and Commander Keen. So yeah, but another one mentioned, produced by Carmack and Romero. Space Invaders. So when Sadie debuts her game Emily Blaster to her class, her professor Dove notes that it's a ripoff of Space Invaders, but with a pen instead of a gun. Whenever my wife and I would go play games in an arcade, she would always crush me on Space Invaders and Galaga, so that is when I knew that we were meant to forever be together. Tetris is the basic game mechanic that Sadie uses to design her second game, Solution. Solution takes that puzzle mechanic and puts it in a larger, darker, more historical fiction context, which leads her classmates to report her to MIT's Committee for Discipline because they felt she violated the student code of conduct by doing so, which is just awesome. Chrono Trigger. Sadie writes her Professor Dove an email at the start of the next semester saying, "Hi Dove, playing Chrono Trigger, some interesting elements in there." He says he's already played it, dismissing it straight away. I liked Chrono Trigger, and Chrono Cross, its sequel, too. Metal Gear Solid, which is an awesome game. Dove receives a press copy from a friend colleague of his and raves about how Hideo Kojima decided not to call this Metal Gear 3, saying, he's being smart actually. If he thinks he has a hit on his hands, it's not only being a good programmer or a good designer, Sadie, you also have to be a marketer and a showman. You'll learn that eventually. He's kind of a jerk. Dove and Sadie go on to play through the game together, and there's quite a bit of writing in the text about how the stealth element of the game kind of mirrors the stealth nature of Sadie's relationship with Dove, as she has to mask the nature of the relationship between student and professor. Tamagotchi. Marx notes how friendship is kind of like having a Tamagotchi. He's given one by an ex-girlfriend of his, and after killing it off accidentally, she breaks up with him, basically noting that he lacks certain characteristics that you would prefer to have in a partner. I guess that about sums it up. Yeah. Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64. Now we're into the N64 PlayStation era generation of games, and while trying to navigate the resource constraints of producing each go in a single summer, Sadie says effectively that they didn't have the resources to make a fully 3D action game like an N64 era Zelda or Mario anyway. The game would have to be for PC, and it would be 2D or 2.5D if she could swing it. Yeah, basically kind of touches on how graphics and the programming underlying these games are advancing, getting a little out of hand for quick and nerdy video game production at this point. Miss Pacman. A bit darker now. So Sam plays this arcade game in a convenience store after he and his mother witness another woman committing suicide, and it helps him kind of process and navigate those traumatic events. The book notes, from what Anna, his mom, could tell, Miss Pacman was no different than Pac-Man, except that she had a bow and was a miss, which in 1984 was an honorific that usually signified a feminist. Later, Sam, in memory of his mom, gets a Korean Hangul tattoo of Umma on his arm, complete with the yellow and pink bow tie, Miss Pacman. Colossal Cave Adventure is a game that Sadie says is ancient school, entirely text, no graphics. Comment below if you remember these games. Like, what was it? Like Return to Zork or some Legend of Zork or something like that? This game comes up as Sadie's working to incorporate a function into the game that she's trying to build at the time that would be similar to Colossal Cave Adventure's Zizzy command, which allows the player, when entering the kind of cheat command, to magically switch between two places. Similarly, in building both sides, we get a mention of King's Quest IV. This is a game that, in the acknowledgements, Zevin also says is one of her favorite games. I personally prefer King's Quest V, but they're these old like point-and-click Sierra adventure games, I guess you would call it. If you've played it, you distinctly remember these games too, I'm sure. Sadie compares the third-person 2D world that she's working on in both sides to King's Quest IV, while the other side, that's first-person and 3D, more like a Zelda game, kind of like the Ocarina of Time. Earlier in the book, though, she mentions going to buy this game at Babbage's. Shout out if you remember Babbage's. Grand Theft Auto is the game that Dove is loudly playing in the next room while Sadie's on the phone talking to Sam about moving to California. While hearing the game, she notes that she felt like she was already in California. Tells you what you should know about Grand Theft Auto. Maniac Mansion is a game that is mentioned retrospectively that Sam and Sadie played together as youngsters while they were in the hospital. It's another adventure Sierra-like adventure game, but it's a LucasArts classic, similar to other games that they produced, like Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, or some of the Monkey Island games. Okay, next up is a string of games that Sadie mentions are all part of her PC game collection that she's unboxing after moving into her Venice office. And those are Commander Keen, Myst, Doom, Diablo, Final Fantasy, Metal Gear Solid, Leisure Suit Larry, The Colonel's Bequest, Ultima, Warcraft, Monkey Island, Oregon Trail, and 3 dozen others. So yeah, there's a bunch in here. I loved playing through Myst as a kid with my mom, Warcraft, Warcraft 2, Tides of Darkness, a couple Monkey Island games, Madden Football. So when Sam and Sadie are in an argument, he says to her quite cruelly, that's when this game gets its mention, "You'd be one of 100 programmers at EA working on Madden Football if you were lucky. There aren't that many girls in our field, you know. You'd probably be working for Dove. He'd probably have you handcuffed to your desk." Ouch. Sometimes Sam can be quite a jerk. Yeah, I mean, Madden Football, you'd have to have been living under a rock for the last 25 years if you have not heard of Madden Football. Suikoden, Crash Bandicoot, and Grim Fandango. These are games mentioned by one of Sam's employees, Simon, as games with cryptic titles that they're trying to use to decide what to name their next game, which kind of has a cryptic title too. He says, "They work because they sound cool." Half-Life and Mario Kart are games mentioned along with Grand Theft Auto and Final Fantasy that Sadie's playing one summer after developing Mapletown. Now, because this is, again, most likely the N64 PlayStation era, these would probably be Final Fantasy VII, Mario Kart 64, and Grand Theft Auto 3. Harvest Moon. So Simon and Aunt give Sadie a Game Boy for the holidays as a gift, which she then takes with her on her trip to Tokyo, Harvest Moon being the game that she has. The book notes that it was one of the first, if not the first, farming game. It was the first farming game that I also ever played, too. And now that I've moved on to other games in my life, my wife is hopelessly addicted to Stardew Valley. EverQuest. So while Sadie's busy playing Harvest Moon, Marks is playing EverQuest, a massively multiplayer online RPG. Some would say it's the first MMORPG, in which Marks has created a half-elf bard named Hella Behemoth, which they then kind of trade off, and he, asks her, entrusts Sadie, be careful with Hella Behemoth. While playing the game, Marks is reminded of his days playing Dungeons & Dragons with Sam, but it's not the reason he's interested in playing it. He more so wants to understand the graphics engine and maybe loop in a similar kind of online element to their next iteration of Counterpart High. Need for Speed. Upon returning to the US, Sadie is helped by a customs agent who asks her what she does. Oh, I create video games. Oh, I like video games. She asks her what she's made. She says Ichigo, which is a massive hit in the book. She notes that she has not heard of it, but instead prefers racing games like Need for Speed and Grand Theft Auto. Half-Life 2, Halo 2, Unreal Tournament, and Call of Duty. Now we are into major spoiler territory. You've been forewarned. These are the games, while each of one of them very different. They do share the common shooter genre, first-person shooters. I mean, it gets sad. These are the games mentioned by the visitors to the Unreal Games lobby, which Marx confronts. Yeah, seriously, so sad. Uncharted and Journey. Marie at Revjo pitches Sadie for an Ichigo 3, wherein Ichigo's grown up, a salaryman, and the game's narrative would be split between Ichigo and his daughter as he goes to try and save her. Marie saw Ichigo as a Peter Pan character, and she wanted to make the story as emotional and immersive as Uncharted or Journey. Of course, a huge nod now to the fact that we're in a more modern era. There's a bit of a time skip that happens. 16 years after the creation of Ichigo. The truly immersive games, if you've played either one of them. Journey is incredible, particularly for not only its gameplay, but its soundtrack. Incredible soundtrack by Austin Wintory, which is kind of based on the monomythic hero's journey. Yeah, check it out if you haven't played Journey and you love gaming. Bioshock 2, Heavy Rain, and Braid. So these are games, again, all much more modern, mentioned by Sam as what he's been playing, speaking with Sadie after that pitch meeting. Bioshock 2, Sam said, great world building, visuals fine, that Unreal style. Heavy Rain does amazing things with point of view. Braid is brilliant. I was jealous the whole time I was playing. I kept wishing we'd made it. Have you played it yet? Yeah, so kind of last mention of games in the book before we reach the conclusion, signifying that in between when these games were released and today, when I'm creating this video in 2023, also a bit of a time, a segment of time, so little room open there for a sequel. Would be very excited to see that. Now, there's a whole bunch of analog games also mentioned in this book. I'm not going to go into all of them here, but things like Magic Eye, Dungeons and Dragons, Hanafara Go, Chinese checkers, checkers chess, MC Escher style mazes, along with plays, musicals, particularly Shakespeare. So, you can understand that this is truly a book for any lover of play, games, and gaming. You're sure to find something that you can resonate with in this one. Yeah, so I just wanted to do this follow-up to my other video on Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which I can include here, which goes a bit more into the book and the content of the story itself. It really is so great, and as fun as each one of these games that I've mentioned, please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment down below. In particular, comment as to which one of these games you love the most, and I will look forward to seeing you next time.